He told me I was alone, that no one would ever stand by me. But 2 years later, he showed up on my doorstep, with suitcases, his kids, and a plan to move in, without asking. This is the story of how I lost everything, rebuilt my life from scratch, and then had to fight to protect it from the very people who once abandoned me. If you've ever been made to feel like you owed something to those who gave you nothing, this one's for you. Let me tell you what happened when my brother tried to claim the home he never helped me build. They say losing a job isn't personal, that it's just business, numbers on a spreadsheet, restructuring, a necessary evil. But when I walked out of MarketSpace Collective that Friday afternoon with a cardboard box full of desk plants and farewell cupcakes, it didn't feel like business. It felt like erasure. I was 35. My name is Marissa Quinn, and until that moment, I thought I had done everything right. I worked late without complaining, made birthdays memorable for my team, even organized the office blood drives and Thanksgiving potlucks. I wasn't a superstar, but I was steady, solid, the kind of person who gets a quiet thank you in their exit email, the severance package. 2 weeks of pay, that barely covered my next rent. Still, I wasn't immediately panicked. I had 3 months of savings, a modest studio apartment just outside the city, and a car that mostly worked. I told myself it was just a detour, not a derailment. I updated my resume, created a spreadsheet of job leads, and treated each day like a mission. But weeks passed, then months. The economy had tanked, and suddenly, I was one of thousands, marketing professionals scrambling for the same shrinking pool of jobs. I stopped keeping track after application 213. I cut back on everything. No more gym, no more takeout, no more $2.75 chai lattes at that indie cafe I loved. Instead, I drank instant coffee and told myself the bitterness made me stronger. What truly hurt wasn't the economy or even the uncertainty, it was the silence, the isolation. And when things became dire, when my landlord reminded me gently but firmly that partial rent wasn't sustainable, I swallowed every ounce of pride I had and did the one thing I had never wanted to do. I called my family. I started with my father, Harold. We've never been especially close, but I thought maybe in crisis blood would count for something. He picked up on the third ring. Dad, I'm sorry to bother you. I lost my job 3 months ago, and I've been trying everything. I'm doing my best, but I need a little help, just to get through next month's rent. There was a long pause. I could hear the click of a golf ball, the quiet hum of television in the background. You should have saved better, he said flatly. This is what happens when people your age live beyond their means. I worked 2 jobs when I was your age. I didn't have time to whine about setbacks. Grow up, Marissa. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He didn't even say goodbye. Just hung up. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Maybe I had dialed the wrong version of him, the one I remembered tucking me into bed during thunderstorms, who once taught me how to change a tire. That man wouldn't have said those things. Next I called my mother, Loretta. She answered with the gentle cadence of a woman who collects ceramic angels and has never missed a Sunday service. "Oh, sweetie," she said, drawing the word out like it could warm me from across the line. "I'm so sorry you're going through this. We'll be thinking of you. Thank you. Mom, I was wondering if maybe you and Dad could help just for this month. I can send you a payment plan. I swear. Just until something comes through. Oh, honey, we just had the new countertops installed. Granite, your father's dream. And we're going to Napa next week. You know how stressful his retirement's been?" My mouth went dry. But maybe, she continued, you should think about cutting back on those fancy coffee drinks. Those little expenses really add up. I hadn't bought coffee in 6 weeks. I wanted to scream, "I'm not asking for your countertops. I'm asking to not be homeless." But I didn't. I just said, "Thanks anyway," and hung up. I saved Darren, my older brother, for last. We had history. When he was between jobs, I helped him pay rent. When his wife was pregnant with their second, I spent weekends babysitting the first. I had driven across 2 states to help them move. I thought if anyone Darren would understand. He didn't. Look, he said, his tone managerial, like I was a problem to be solved at arm's length. We all make choices, Marissa. Maybe if you hadn't spent so much on that apartment, or tried to live like you were making 6 figures, you'd have a cushion. I've been living off ramen and skipping doctor appointments, Darren. You think I'm splurging? I have kids to feed, a mortgage, real responsibilities. I went quiet. That line, real responsibilities, lodged somewhere sharp inside my chest. We'll always care about you, he added. But maybe don't reach out again until you've figured things out. It's exhausting. That night I sat in the dark, knees tucked to my chest, replaying each conversation. I had spent so many years being the helper, the dependable one. Now, when I needed just a little grace, all I got were lectures and dismissals. Still, I tried once more. I asked if we could have dinner. All of us. Just to talk. Maybe face to face would remind them I wasn't a failure. I was just lost. They agreed. I wish they hadn't. We met at my parents' house. The table was set with care. Roast chicken, green beans, soft rolls. Everything smelled like childhood. But the conversation was ice. Rebecca, Darren's wife, barely looked up from her phone. "This is what happens when you live like tomorrow's guaranteed," she said, sipping her wine. I blinked. "Rebecca, I didn't plan a layoff." "Exactly. You didn't plan." My father muttered something about character being forged in fire. My mother asked if I'd considered online dating. Maybe a husband would help with rent. But it was Darren who finished the job. "We have families, Marissa. Kids. Real lives. You're alone. You only have yourself to worry about." I drove home that night shaking not from rage, but from the deep aching grief of knowing I had no one. Not really. The next morning, my phone buzzed. "Don't contact us again until you've sorted yourself out. We can't keep bailing you out." It's embarrassing. They had never bailed me out, not once. And now they never would. But somewhere deep inside the wreckage of that night, something stirred. Something stubborn. Something small and angry and glowing. Maybe I didn't have them. But I still had me, and I wasn't done yet. I don't remember the exact day I stopped opening bills. I just know it was sometime after my third job rejection in 1 week after the final "Sorry, we've moved forward with another candidate" email that made my hands tremble. That night, I sat on my mattress and stared at the yellow envelope from the property manager, too afraid to break its seal. When I finally opened it, the words blurred through my tears. Eviction notice. I had 10 days. I tried selling everything I could: my grandmother's china set, the vintage typewriter I once used for freelance work, even my blender. I listed my sofa, then my dining chairs, then the bookshelf my college roommate and I had built together from recycled crates. The last thing I sold was my bed. I slept on the floor that night, curled up under a coat. Moving day wasn't really a move. There was nowhere to go. I packed a few outfits, toiletries, and my old laptop into my aging sedan and drove 3 blocks to the 24-hour Walmart parking lot. That night, as I reclined my seat and tried to sleep, the reality of it all settled on my chest like wet cement. My world had shrunk to the dimensions of a car seat and a dashboard. For the next few weeks, my life became a sequence of unspoken rituals. Mornings started with brushing my teeth in the gas station restroom. I kept baby wipes in the glove compartment and dry shampoo in the center console. If I got lucky and the Planet Fit gym near downtown hadn't changed its key code, I could sneak in a 5-minute shower and hope no one asked questions. Breakfast was a protein bar eaten in the dark while pretending the steering wheel was a kitchen table. I drank instant coffee made with lukewarm water from the grocery store bathroom. There's a bitterness to that kind of coffee that no sweetener can touch. By 9 a.m., I'd park near the public library, plug in my laptop, and spend hours applying for jobs. I started bringing headphones to drown out the noise of kids playing games or couples arguing quietly in the rows behind me. I told myself I was just like any other freelancer. Remote, mobile focused, but inside I felt like a ghost in a world that didn't see me anymore. I skipped lunch most days, not out of some frugal discipline, but because I couldn't afford both lunch and the gas it would take to drive across town to the next Wi-Fi source. Dinner was ramen cooked on a portable coil stove I bought for $10 on clearance. I parked behind a discount store waiting for the manager to leave so I wouldn't be noticed. The first time I burned my finger trying to drain the noodles, I cried. Not from the pain, but from the absurdity of it all. I had a college degree. I once ran multi-million-dollar ad campaigns. Now I was boiling dinner in a parking lot hiding from security lights. The nights were the worst. There's a certain kind of silence that only exists inside a car after midnight. Not peaceful, not still, just hollow. I'd scroll through social media watching old college friends post pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, new homes. I tried not to hate them, but sometimes the jealousy felt like fire under my skin. There were moments I considered calling my family again. I stared at my phone more times than I can count. But then I'd hear Darren's voice in my head, "You only have yourself to worry about." And I'd put the phone back down. I started avoiding mirrors. I couldn't stand the way my skin looked without proper rest, the dark circles, the hollow cheeks. Even my clothes felt different, like they belonged to someone else, someone who used to have a place in the world. There were entire days where I didn't speak to another human being. The loneliness was bone deep, a kind of aching silence that made me question if I even existed outside my own thoughts. And yet, somehow, I kept going. Every morning, I'd wash my face with bottled water, tie my hair back, and open my laptop. I sent resumes to companies I'd never heard of for jobs I didn't even know I could do. I walked to libraries in neighborhoods I'd never been to before just to feel like I was still moving forward. Hope became less of a feeling and more of a decision, a choice I made each time I put one foot in front of the other. Still, every night when I curled up in the back seat hugging my laptop bag like a lifeline, I asked myself the same question. How did I get here? And more terrifying, what if I never get out? I didn't know it then, but that question would become the turning point. The beginning of a quiet, unglamorous kind of resilience. The kind that doesn't look like triumph at first. Just breath. Just survival. But sometimes that's where healing begins. There was nothing extraordinary about the day I met Eli Mercer again. It was just another Tuesday, gray and humid, and I was sitting in the corner of the downtown public library, using the free Wi-Fi, and silently praying my car battery wouldn't die while idling outside. My laptop was overheating from use. I hadn't eaten since the night before. I was halfway through rewriting my resume, again, when I heard someone clear their throat nearby. Marissa Quinn. I looked up, blinking fast, trying to place the face. Then it clicked. Eli, soft-spoken, painfully smart, one of the only genuinely kind people from my old job. He'd been in data analytics back when I worked in content strategy. We'd chatted a few times at team lunches once, even co-led a presentation on SEO and audience behavior. He was the type who remembered people's birthdays but never talked about his own. He looked surprised but not judgmental. "Didn't expect to run into you here." "Yeah, well," I said, gesturing vaguely to the worn carpet and fluorescent lights. "This is my office now." He hesitated for a second, then pulled up a chair. "Are you okay?" I smiled in that brittle, reflexive way you do when you're not okay but don't have the energy to explain. "I've been better." He nodded, didn't press. Instead, he said something that shifted everything. "I just started a side project. A small marketing consultancy for nonprofits. It's still new, but I could really use someone with your skill set. Part-time, flexible. It wouldn't pay much, at least not at first. But maybe it's something." I think my hands actually trembled. "Yes," I said, a little too fast. "Yes, absolutely. I'll take anything." He handed me his card. The edges were slightly bent, the ink a little faded, which somehow made it feel more sincere. That night, I bought myself a cheap pad of paper and made a list titled Phase 1 Digging Out. I taped it to the dashboard of my car. Item 1 was already crossed off. Get a job. Item 2 came the following week. While doing research for a new client, I stopped at a dive bar near the edge of the arts district. Cheap food, low expectations, open Wi-Fi. I ordered fries and nursed a soda for hours. Around 10, a girl with bright purple braids and a chipped tooth ringed by dark lipstick slid behind the bar and started pouring drinks like it was performance art. She noticed me after a while. "You've been here all night." I smiled. "I'm working." Sort of. "You on the clock?" "No, just using the Wi-Fi, but I can leave if you want a real clock to be on." That's how I met Tessa Rowe, law student by day, bartender by night, an apparently recruiter for overworked side hustlers. The owner needed a weekend server and someone to cover slow weekday shifts. No training required. Cash at the end of every night. I started the next day. The first month was brutal. By day, I was helping Eli build pitch decks, draft newsletters, and chase down unpaid invoices from hesitant clients. By night, I was slinging whiskey shots to men who called me hun and pretended not to see the tip jar. I worked 70 hours a week, slept in short bursts, and lived on caffeine and adrenaline. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. I was useful again. Tessa and I became fast friends. We both had scars, though hers were older and healed in different ways. One night after a double shift, we sat outside on milk crates behind the bar, splitting a pack of peanut butter crackers and talking about our families. She didn't flinch when I told her about the car, the eviction, the things I'd had to sell. She just nodded and passed me a half-full soda. "I've been there," she said. "Still sort of am." 2 weeks later, she offered to share her studio apartment. Just a mattress on the floor, a hot plate, and a window with no screen, but 4 solid walls and a door that locked. I moved in that weekend. Rent was manageable between us, and we built a routine that felt almost normal. She studied law by day. I worked freelance. Then we'd meet at the bar for late shifts, split groceries, and take turns fighting over the one good frying pan. One night, I came home from the bar at 2 a.m., brain buzzing from drink orders and mop water. I opened my laptop and, without really thinking, typed in digital marketing online certifications. I found a free course, then another. Signed up. No fancy tuition or schedules. Just videos, PDFs, and the quiet hope that maybe this time I wouldn't fall behind. I studied late at night with earbuds and watching tutorials on email funnels, data analytics, social segmentation. Slowly, a spark reignited. The part of me that loved learning that once stayed up until 3 a.m, crafting ad copy for a client that no one else could understand. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding, brick by brick, slide deck by slide deck, tip jar by tip jar. And for the first time in a long while, I believed there might actually be something waiting on the other side of this storm. The first time Eli called me into his office to talk numbers, I assumed the worst. Old habits die hard. A quiet dread settled in my stomach as I walked across the small co-working space we shared with 2 other startups. But when I stepped inside and saw him smiling behind his scratched-up desk, that dread morphed into disbelief. "You're not in trouble," he said, laughing when he saw my face. "Actually, I wanted to thank you. You've been a godsend, Marissa. You've taken work off my plate, brought new clients to the table, and that nonprofit campaign you pitched, it's blowing up." He handed me a sheet showing the metrics. Donations had increased over 300% in less than 6 weeks. "I've never seen engagement like this," he continued. "They've nominated the campaign for the Regional Marketing Impact Awards." I blinked at the paper. "They... what?" "Yeah," he grinned. "And we're submitting it under your name." The next words felt surreal: a raise, more responsibility, and an invitation to lead upcoming projects. For the first time in years, someone was saying, "You did this. You matter." That night, I didn't go out to celebrate. Instead, I sat in our tiny kitchen with Tessa, sharing instant noodles and a bottle of $7 wine we'd been saving for something special. We clinked mismatched mugs and laughed like 2 kids who had no idea how we'd gotten here but were grateful we did. The weeks leading up to the award ceremony were hectic. Between Eli's growing list of clients and my night shifts at the bar, I barely slept. But I didn't care. I was building something real. The job gave me a title. The effort gave me a sense of purpose. And when the envelope arrived announcing that we'd won for Best Cause Marketing Campaign, I felt something unfamiliar: pride without apology. The ceremony was held at a downtown hotel with too much velvet and not enough legroom. I wore the only formal dress I owned, one I'd bought secondhand and altered at home. Still, when I stood behind the podium to accept the award, the room fell quiet. I looked out at a sea of strangers in suits, people who didn't know I'd been homeless 18 months ago, who didn't know I once cried brushing my teeth in a gym sink because it was the only place I could. "I accept this award on behalf of those of us who started over," I said, hands only slightly trembling. "Who rebuilt piece by piece without shortcuts or safety nets. This campaign wasn't just about raising funds, it was about proving that authentic voices still matter. Afterward, during the reception, I tried to fade into the background, balancing a plate of cheese cubes and sipping club soda when a tall man in a charcoal suit approached me. "That speech," he said, extending a hand. "You didn't sound like a marketer. You sounded like someone who's lived 1,000 lives." I shook his hand, a little cautious. "Is that a compliment?" "It is," he said warmly. "Grant Wallace. I'm with Baystone Financial." I recognized the name. A major bank, big campaigns, bigger budgets. I braced myself for the pitch, or maybe some casual probing about job prospects. But Grant didn't mention business. Instead, he asked about the nonprofit behind the campaign, what their mission was, why I'd chosen them. We talked for nearly an hour, about impact strategy, burnout, and purpose. Then, somewhere between conversations about donation funnels and Instagram fatigue, he said, "You mentioned in your speech you rebuilt your life." That resonated. I hesitated. I wasn't used to people actually caring what that meant. "My parents weren't around," he added, reading my pause with eerie accuracy. "I was raised by my grandfather until he passed. Since then, it's been just me figuring it out." There was no pity in his voice, just quiet understanding. And that thread of shared experience, of growing up without a net, tied something between us neither of us had expected. We exchanged numbers. No promises, no pressure, just a feeling. And for the first time in a very long time, I walked away from a professional room, not just seen, but understood. Later that night, when I got home and found a small vase of flowers on our kitchen counter, Tessa had picked them up on her way home. I felt the oddest thing. Not joy, not relief, peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because slowly, piece by piece, I was being seen, not just as someone who had survived, but someone who was now living. The promotion came on a Thursday. Eli pulled me aside after a meeting, his face a little flushed, like he was nervous to deliver good news for once. "I want you to lead client relations," he said. "You've already been doing the work, and frankly, the clients trust you more than they trust me." "It's overdue." I blinked. "Me?" He laughed. "Of course you. I can't run this place without you anymore." The title felt surreal. Head of Client Engagement. But the raise, the respect, the way my email signature changed. That was very real. It wasn't about power or prestige. It was about belonging. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to claw my way into a room. I was being invited to sit at the table to make decisions to build something lasting. With the promotion came stability. I finally paid off the last of my credit card debt. Tessa and I celebrated with matching keychains and a small chocolate cake that we ate with soup spoons because all the forks were in the sink. A few months later, I did something I never thought I'd do. I bought a house. It wasn't fancy. Just a small 3-bedroom bungalow with chipped white paint, a creaky porch, and a backyard full of wild violets and overgrown shrubs. But when I stepped through the front door for the first time, I didn't see imperfection. I saw potential. There was a fireplace that still worked, hardwood floors hiding under layers of carpet, and a patch of sun that hit the kitchen windows every morning. I signed the papers with trembling hands and tears I didn't try to hide. The house wasn't just a purchase. It was a rebuke to every whispered insult about how I'd never build anything on my own. It was proof that I didn't just survive. I built a life without them. I moved in on a Saturday with help from Eli, Grant, and Tessa, all three of them insisting they didn't need payment, just pizza. We painted walls, hung string lights, and danced to old pop songs while unpacking dishes. For the first time in my life, I felt like the people in my space were there because they chose to be, not out of obligation but affection. And then came Sunday morning. It was quiet. Not silent like loneliness, but still in a way that settled into my bones. I sat on the back step with a mug of coffee wrapped in a cardigan too big for summer and watched the birds fight over a slice of old bread I had tossed out. I wasn't rushing to a shift. I wasn't worried about rent. I didn't have to ask permission to exist in that space. I just was. That morning I finished an entire novel in one sitting. The coffee went cold. The sun moved from one side of the yard to the other. I didn't check my phone once. It was the first time in years I felt safe. Tessa noticed the shift before I did. She said it one night while we were sitting on the porch sipping iced tea. "You seem lighter," she said. "I think I am." "You ever think about talking to someone, a therapist, I mean?" I hesitated, not because I was against it, but because I didn't know how to begin unpacking everything I'd buried. She didn't press, just handed me a folded business card and said, "She's good, and she doesn't take bullshit." It took me another 3 weeks. But when I finally did, and the receptionist asked why I was sitting there, I said the first honest thing that came to mind: I want to learn how to forgive people without letting them hurt me again. Her name was Dr. Lyman. Sessions with her were uncomfortable at first, like stretching muscles that had been tight for years. But slowly I learned to unravel the narrative I'd been told my whole life, that I was only as valuable as my ability to be useful to others. We talked about boundaries, about grief, about why I still flinched when my phone buzzed and the caller ID said Mom. She never told me to hate them. She never told me to cut them off completely. But she taught me something I hadn't known was possible. I could grieve what I never had and still move forward. I didn't have to wait for my family to apologize in order to begin healing. I didn't have to keep proving I was worthy of love. My value didn't come from their validation. It came from the girl who survived sleeping in a car and the woman who rebuilt a life anyway. One brick, one shift, one breath at a time. It happened on a Sunday. Of course it did. The same kind of Sunday I had come to cherish. No alarms, sunlight on the hardwood floor, the quiet hum of the coffee machine, the lazy flick of pages in a novel I wasn't rushing to finish. I had just poured myself a second cup and stepped out onto the back patio when I heard a car door slam. Then another. Then more. 3 in total. I peeked through the kitchen blinds and froze. A minivan I didn't recognize sat in my driveway, its back doors flung open, revealing a mess of duffel bags, plastic bins, and a box of cereal spilling onto the concrete. And standing at my front porch as if they owned the deed was my brother Darren, his wife Celeste, and their 2 kids Nora and Owen. I hadn't spoken to any of them in nearly 2 years. By the time I reached the door, Darren was already halfway through a knock that sounded more like a demand. I opened it, still clutching my coffee mug like it might protect me. He didn't smile, didn't greet me, just said, "You don't have a family, Marissa. So what's the point of a house this size?" My stomach dropped. Celeste offered a tight-lipped smile, her phone already up as she scanned the entryway, probably angling for good light. The kids didn't bother pretending. Nora pushed past me into the hallway, calling dibs on a bedroom, while Owen zoomed down the corridor making race car noises with his mouth. I stood there, stunned, while my brother lifted a bag over his shoulder and stepped inside without waiting for permission. "We've had a rough year," he said flatly, looking around like he was conducting a real estate tour. "I lost my job in March. Celeste's part-time hours got cut and the lease was up last week. Thought we had more time. But," he shrugged, like it wasn't really his fault. "Landlord sold the property. No notice." "You believe that?" Before I could answer, Celeste walked into my living room, sat down on the couch, and pulled off her heels. "At least you kept the place nice. I always knew you were one of those organized loner types." I still hadn't spoken. I couldn't. My brain was trying to catch up with the sheer absurdity of what was happening. This wasn't a visit. This was a takeover. "You're probably wondering why we're here." Darren continued, setting down a cooler like he was preparing for a tailgate. "We talked it through. Just for a while. 6 months, maybe a year. Give the kids some stability." No. I finally said the word, catching like a splinter in my throat. "You can't just show up here with your stuff and assume." "We're not assuming," Celeste cut in, arms crossed. "We're family." I looked at her, at Darren, at the bags now cluttering my foyer, at the crumpled fast food wrappers their kids had already dropped on my rug. Family. That word used to mean something. Warmth, shared history, a reason to keep trying even when things were hard. But from them it was a knife dressed in lace. "You never reached out," I said, my voice low, steadying. "Not when I lost my job. Not when I was living in my car. I begged you for help." Darren didn't flinch. "We had our own issues. And now that I have something..." Anything. You feel entitled to it. He stepped closer, eyes hard. You owe us. Everything Mom and Dad gave you growing up. We let them help you more because you were younger. You always had the freedom to find yourself. Now it's your turn to give back. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. A manufactured debt for something they never paid into. You live alone, Celeste added, gesturing around like she was listing a property for rent. This place has space. It's selfish not to share it. I had heard a lot of audacity in my life. But this was a masterclass. The kids had made it to the kitchen. I heard cabinets opening. The fridge door slammed. One of them spilled something. I don't think you understand, I said, finally stepping between Darren and the living room. This is my home, my space. You don't get to just walk in and take it because your life fell apart. Your life fell apart too, he snapped. And you didn't do it alone. We were there. No, I said quietly. You were not. That hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, none of them spoke. Not even the kids. And then, without waiting for an invitation, Darren walked to the guest room, pushed open the door, and said over his shoulder, "We'll get out of your hair as soon as we're back on our feet. You'll see. It'll be like old times." Except old times were what got me here. Alone, cold, uninvited in my own life. I stood there, my heart pounding, watching as they made themselves comfortable in a life they never helped build. And I knew with terrifying clarity that this wasn't just about space. It was about control. And I wasn't giving that up again. The house was quieter than it should have been after they left. Not the kind of quiet that soothes you, but the kind that makes your ears ring, like something inside you has gone too still. After Darren and Celeste had taken the kids to get fast food, I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by traces of their sudden occupation. A cereal box on the counter, a damp towel left on the bathroom floor, a toy truck under the coffee table. Their voices still echoed in the walls even though they were gone, for now. That's when I picked up my phone and called Grant. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, everything okay?" I didn't say anything for a moment, just let my breath steady. Then I whispered, "I need help." He was at my house within the hour with Tessa and Eli not far behind. We sat around my kitchen table, each with a mug of something warm in our hands. The overhead light buzzed faintly. It felt like a war council disguised as a dinner party. I told them everything. How Darren had shown up with no warning, how he said I owed them, how they walked in like I didn't even live here. Grant's jaw tightened as he listened. "That's trespassing." Tessa leaned forward. "It's also emotional manipulation." They knew exactly what they were doing. Eli pulled out his laptop, already searching legal terms. "You're the sole owner on the title, right? No co-signers." I nodded. "Good," he said. "Then we start there." What followed was one of the strangest, most empowering evenings of my life. We made a plan. Tessa, who had taken several courses in housing law during her first year of law school, outlined my rights in detail. "They are not tenants," she explained. "They don't pay rent, they don't have a lease, and they never had your permission. If you say they can't be here, that's final." Eli suggested I document everything. "Start a paper trail," he said. "If they fight back, you'll need proof." Grant, calm, always thoughtful, focused on logistics. Secure your space. Lock doors. Back up important files. And if they come back, don't engage emotionally. Stick to facts. We worked well into the night. By the end of it, I had a printed folder of text messages, screenshots of old emails, and a typed list of what each person in my family had said to me in the past. The dismissals, the blame, the silence. Some of the messages were so cruel, I couldn't believe I'd ever let them back in my heart. But reading them now, I didn't cry. I felt clear. I also began preparing the house. I locked every room that held anything personal, my office, my bedroom, even the storage closet under the stairs. I labeled things plainly: "Do not enter, private." I dug out the small recording device Grant had given me months ago, One of those smart little gadgets you clip to your keychain just in case. I charged it overnight. The next morning, I rearranged the furniture in the dining room to make space for one conversation table and 4 chairs, one for me, 3 for them. The whole thing was so methodical, so specific, it felt like I was staging a play. But it wasn't theater. It was my life. And for the first time in a long time, I was the director. I sent Darren a message around 8 a.m. Let's talk things through. Come by at noon. Just adults. No kids this time. Please respect that. He responded within 5 minutes. Finally. Looking forward to a real conversation. I didn't tell him I'd have a plan. I didn't tell him that he'd no longer have access to my home beyond that front door. Because I wasn't asking. This wasn't about negotiation. This was about reclaiming something I didn't even realize I had lost: my power, my clarity, my permission to not be available to people who only saw me as a resource. That night, as the clock ticked past midnight, I sat in my living room in silence. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This time it felt like readiness. And when I closed my eyes, I didn't feel dread about the next day. I felt ready to speak, to draw a line, to end the conversation they started long ago on terms I never agreed to. Have you ever had to choose peace over people you once called family? Have you ever rebuilt something alone, quietly, brick by brick, only to have someone try to claim it as theirs? If Marissa's story stirred something in you, maybe it's because you've lived a piece of it too. Let's talk about it. What does family mean to you now? Is it about blood, or the people who show up when it matters? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. Your story matters here. And if you'd like to hear more true-to-life stories about resilience, boundaries, healing, and finding your voice, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next story that just might feel like yours.